Number 1. I am a uni student now, but this incident happened when I was in the 8th grade. When I was around 14, I studied a subject focusing on outdoor pursuits. For our final assessment, 2 teachers took my class on a one-night camp where we would do activities like rock climbing, kayaking, trail walking, etc. I live in Australia, around an hour from a state forest that was notorious for the backpacker murders. Several bodies have been found and several more remain missing. I'm pretty sure all of the murders were linked to the same serial killer. Anyway, in the morning we leave school and drive out in a bus. When we reach the road that leads to the entrance of the forest, a police car is parked to the side. He spoke to the teacher for a moment, but I didn't hear anything and no one else seems to notice or care. Fast forward a few hours and was trekked, about 20 of us, to the camping area somewhere in the middle of the state forest. Some parts are state, some are privately owned, I think. Whilst kayaking that afternoon, we noticed a helicopter doing flybys, but again, my classmates never suspected anything. A couple of mates and I were the first to leave the water and helped the teacher with some equipment and started building our own rafts. I was standing off to the side when one of the national park guys walked over to one of the instructors and talked in a hushed, slightly stressed out tone. I remember hearing the instructor say stuff like, "You're kidding," and "I don't believe it." He just looked shocked and taken aback. So at this point, I started connecting the dots, but I didn't say anything to my school friends. Around dusk that night, I go to use the toilet block, which is around 100 metres from the main campsite. As I go in, I remember a guy walking around the other side of the block. I didn't see him very clearly in the diminished light, but he kept glancing around with nervous body language. I couldn't see his face clearly. He wasn't part of our party, and to me, he just didn't fit. I didn't think much of it at the time. Fast forward to the next morning when we get back to the car park. The teacher tells us that a body was found in a dam not far from where we were. They didn't want to tell us as to not frighten us. We later found out it was a young guy who was killed with an axe, and the guy who did it was related to the serial killer who hunted in the same area. I don't know if that guy had anything to do at all with the murders, but it freaked me out a lot afterwards. I haven't been camping since. Number 2. 5 years ago, I was living in a nice and fairly safe neighbourhood with my boyfriend at the time. I was extremely used to walking around the area on my own, even at night, and never had cause for concern. One night, I was coming back from the grocery store at around 10 p.m, a little bit late, but I was only a 10-minute walk from home, and again, I considered our neighbourhood very safe, which is part of why I was wearing headphones. I know, not smart. I was much younger. As I was walking, I passed the dude walking the other direction with his hands in the pockets of his hoodie and the hood up. It was a cold night, so I didn't think much about it. But he was the only other person out, and his hoodie was bright orange and red, so pretty recognisable. I kinda nodded and smiled, as was my habit, and continued on. On the route home, I would pass the church, which was very pretty, so I often stopped and looked at it during the day. In particular, it has a series of small dragons carved into the side of right above my head level. I always thought they looked kind of sweet and would stop to give their faces a pat, or just admire them if I was going by. That night, I started to walk past them and was struck by a sudden kind of shameful guilt that I wasn't saying hello. So I paused and turned around to take a quick look at them. I think I startled Hoodie Guy as much as he startled me. He was maybe 3 feet behind me, and I almost walked right into him as I turned round. There was half a breath where we were both baffled, and I immediately sped past him to the closest corner and popped my headphones out. It was so surreal feeling that I was half willing to write it off as a coincidence, but called my boyfriend anyway just in case. I was walking backwards to keep an eye on the corner I had just turned. Hoodie guy walks up to the corner, looks around it, and seeing me on the phone, immediately starts running back the way we were both initially walking. That dissolved any hope that he hadn't been following me. My boyfriend picked me up and I got home safely, even though I fully believe it was a weird coincidence urge. The next morning, I took some apples and flowers over and left them by the little dragon carvings. I think that part of why it doesn't still seem scary to me is that the memory of his perfect what the fuck face when I almost walked right into his arms. But still, hoodie dude, let's not meet. Number 3. So yesterday, I was home alone with only my younger brother for company. This is normally fine. My brother is 14 at the moment and has already overtaken me in height, so I don't feel the need to regularly check up on him or anything. Keeping in mind, here I live in a relatively safe suburban area, and despite a few weird encounters while I've walked home through the woods, I've never really felt at risk until now. Around lunchtime, I was up in my room when I heard knocks on the door. And not just one knock, but repeated knocks getting louder and louder and more frequent. To help explain why this was so creepy, we have a front porch. The first door being glass and the second solid wood. The knocks were on the wooden door, which means that this person had opened the first door and entered the house. I was freaked, but given I couldn't see who was outside, without being able to be seen myself, I just left it. The knocking stopped after about 5 minutes. About an hour later, the door was knocked on again. Only twice. But again, I just left it and I forgot about it until my dad came home. My dad comes home around 6ish, and as soon as he came in, he came straight up to my room and asked if I was okay, or had I seen anything unusual. Obviously, I told him what had happened, and he explained what he had just heard from the neighbours across the street. They looked out of the window to see a man standing outside my house, staring right at it for about an hour. This was odd enough until he told me that the reason they had come over to check on us so much later, our neighbours were the second knock, were because even after the first set of knocking stopped, this man had stayed outside our house, looking in windows for half an hour or so before leaving. What was worse about this is that this man knew my brother was home, as his room is at the front of the house and can be seen into easily. Ben is completely oblivious to all of this because he's absorbed in his computer game, so much so he didn't even hear the knocking. Fast forward to my dad coming home, and outside our house he finds an axe. An old axe just outside the front of our house. Update to today, and our house was knocked on again. Only, today my brother caught sight of a large man with overalls on. He wasn't very descriptive. Number 4. This happened about 2 years ago, when I was driving into Williamsburg, Brooklyn, to see my boyfriend at the time. Now my ex, thank God. I was from New Jersey, so normally I would drive in or take the train. This time, I decided to drive in. It was a Sunday evening, and as usual, I was stuck in gridlock traffic getting onto Canal Street. It was one of those traffic jams where the light turns green and you still aren't moving. Welcome to New York. Anyways, I know New York City is full of weirdos. Hell, even New Jersey too. I've had my share of encounters. Plus, I grew up in a pretty unsavoury neighbourhood, so things don't really get to me. But this one struck a chord. As I was sitting in my car, I was looking outside of my side window, not paying much attention to the front, since my car couldn't move. Little did I know that someone was leaning over right on top of my windshield staring at me. I looked forward and was startled. My heart sank into my stomach. Looking at me was a crazy homeless man. Quite normal for New York City, and America unfortunately. Only this man was different. He was a black man with caked on peach coloured paint smeared all over his face. The paint almost looked like the makeup they use on dead people at funeral homes. Waxy and very artificial. He had a huge Joker-like smile on his face, and his eyes were huge, red, and staring straight into me. It literally felt like his eyes were swords penetrating into my heart. The man was also breathing heavy, as with each breath his shoulders would rise. He must have been there for at least 30 seconds without me knowing. This was so unexpected, I didn't know what to do. And what I find even more strange about this whole situation is that he was pressing some sort of coin onto my windshield. Perhaps he wanted money, or was trying to sell me some sort of a collector's coin. I decided to man up and take control of the situation and started yelling at him to move, pretending to be pissed off and annoyed, to hide the fact that I was creeped the hell out. He did move anyway, slowly, but continued to stare at me until he was out of sight. When I got into Brooklyn, I told my boyfriend about the whole thing because it struck some sort of chord with me, and I was really shaken up. He didn't seem to care much, because he was a total jerk, but I almost felt as if this creepy man was still thinking about me, and sort of knew that his presence resonated with me and he found pleasure in it. Number 5. I used to work at a Chipotle back when I had an eating disorder. It was my lunch break and I was sitting down at one of the booths reading a book when this random 50-year-old guy sat in front of me. He barely had any hair. He was overweight, bulging eyes, big glasses, round cheeks. If someone asked me to describe a paedophile, I would describe that guy. He asked me why I wasn't eating, and for a second I thought that maybe he was just being nice. I think it was pretty obvious something was wrong with me at that time. I was 5'5" and 85 pounds, but I was wrong, of course. I told him I wasn't hungry, and he said, "Of course you are." And he gave me a granola bar and a bottle of water. The granola bar wasn't wrapped in anything. It was in a plastic bag. The water bottle was already opened also. I said thank you and told him I really wasn't hungry. He kept on pushing me to drink the water, saying things like, "Your lips look dry, try the water," and "If your mouth is dry, you won't be able to kiss as well." When I heard him say that, I almost threw up. I looked at him for a good 30 seconds. My face obviously showed that I was disgusted by him, and he got visibly angry. He balled up his fists and started tapping his leg. He asked me one more time to drink the water. I told him that I don't want his water and that I can get my own. I guess that really pissed him off, because he took the water and grabbed my face and tried to force me to drink it. One of my co-workers saw that and ran over and grabbed me and pulled me away from the creep and yelled at him to get out or she is going to call the police. 30 minutes after he left, I started throwing up everywhere. We did call the police even though he left, and I told them what he looked like. They watched the security tapes, but nothing happened. I have no idea if they found him or if they even searched for him. I have seen him walk by the Chipotle a couple of times. He never looked directly at me, but he did look in. A couple of weeks after that, I quit my job. I started to eat again. So, creep at Chipotle? Let's not meet. Ever. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment below. All feedback, good or otherwise, is always appreciated. If you have any creepy stories of your own, or have any topics that you would like me to cover, feel free to send them in via any of my social media. You can find all links to my social media in the description below. Until next time guys, make sure you lock your doors, stay safe, and I'll see you next video.